So welcome everybody to our Recruitment Frameworks Planning for 2025 webinar. And we're going to run through a number of the key frameworks that are upcoming for me for people to apply through public sector. And then, as Chris said, if you pop your questions in the chat, we can get to them at the questions answered section. So just to start with a bit about us and the webinar. So Thornton Lowe is an established bid writing consultancy based here in Greater Manchester. We specialise in helping clients grow their business through framework access and competitive tendering. The webinar is for you guys who want to resource people into the public sector for both clinical and non-clinical roles. So it's looking at every role that possibly could be supplied. The aim of the webinar is ultimately to give you an understanding of these frameworks, which are being released over the next 12 months, including the information we either know or we're assuming on that, so you have an informed session with us. Any questions, as we've said, pop them in the Q&A box, in the chat box, and we'll get to them shortly. So just before we go into the actual frameworks, it's probably just worth explaining why you would be on a framework or want to be on a framework. So it gives access to the opportunities. You're an approved supplier, which means that everything is structured for public sector buyers to call off and put their opportunities on. You're pre-approved, so you've already met certain standards and technical ability and quality information, so it makes that awarding easier later on. The framework agreement gives you and the buyer legal protections through terms and conditions, because you'll sign up to them, so you've got a clear way of working. It's efficient and cost saving, so it'll streamline the procurement process, reducing the time and costs associated. So rather than putting out lots of tenders, they can do the mini competitions, and it's an easier way for them to do that. Also, it's about reputation and trust. So if you're on a government framework, it enhances your reputation. You've got that badge as such to say that you're an approved supplier and that you've met the high standards that are required for that framework in the public sector. There's different types of frameworks. So under the new Procurement Act, which is 4 weeks old as of now, there are different types of frameworks. So a standard framework are contracts between contracting authorities. Open frameworks, they will have a longer duration and open at certain parts throughout them for new suppliers. You've got dynamic markets, so dynamic purchasing systems, which are an agreement for suppliers, and then there's light touch frameworks. All of the frameworks we're talking about at the moment look to be the standard or closed type frameworks that will be issued. But again, as we get new information, we'll get it sent out to people and shared. So I'm going to hand over to Stacey, who'll cover off the first few batches of frameworks.
Thanks, Graham. So yes, the first one that we're going to look at is the Healthcare Workforce Solutions Framework. This is a Crown Commercial Services framework, and it is delivered for the NHS Workforce Alliance in partnership with Crown Commercial Services. We are expecting the ITT, so the invitation to tender, and the document pack to be released in August this year. And we are expecting that it is going to be a 3-year duration as well. It's going to cover things like outsourced staff banks, managed service solutions, permanent and temporary recruitment, and bespoke workforce management plans. We're working on the basis that there will be individual lots for each clinical role, and that's what we have seen previously, so nurses, doctors, etc., and lots of neutral and master vendor suppliers. It is a replacement of a framework, which is the provision of clinical staffing 2, we believe, and buyers will include all NHS trusts within the UK, local authorities, and any other care-based organisations within public sector. So there's lots of different buyers that can procure services through this framework. The second is local government partnership. We don't have a specific date for this one. We're expecting it within Q3 of 2025. And again, we are looking at this one being a 3-year duration. It's looking to be around 500 million estimated value. It is in partnership with YPO and the London Borough of Waltham Forest for public sector to access, procure, route and resource services. We do have a lot structure, which is split down into interim recruitment, permanent recruitment, HR consultancy, and HR marketing and advertising. Work on this one can be awarded through direct award and further competition, which will reduce the procurement timescales for buyers and suppliers. Buyers do include local government, so councils, that kind of thing, your central government, blue light services, and housing associations as well. So a really great mix of organisations that can buy. We then also have the supply teachers and temporary staff. Again, October 2025, another 3-year duration. They're liking the 3 years at the moment. And we've got a little bit of a higher value on this one. We've got 650 million. It is to recruit temporary and fixed term teachers, education support staff, non-teaching staff for UK schools, colleges, education establishments. And it's not available for independent for-profit schools. The current lot structure is Lot 1 preferred supplier list, which is temporary and fixed term workers. We've got Lot 2.1, which is master vendor, Lot 2.2, another master vendor. We've got Lot 4, which is education, training platforms, technology appliance to hire temporary workers. The types of workers that can be supplied through this, again, it's not limited to this, though, is teachers, education, support staff, head teachers, senior leaders, admin, clerical, finance, IT, caretakers, cleaners, anyone that would basically be in an education setting can be procured through this. And it is going to be used across all schools for primary and secondary and for further and higher education establishments, nurseries, preschools. It may also be used for prisons and hospitals and that kind of thing as well, we believe.
Super. So back to me, executive and non-executive search 3. So this is a framework that we only have kind of core information on right now. It looks like it's going to amalgamate a couple of current searches and frameworks that are there. But ultimately, this is a framework which is due out Q1 next year. It's 3-year, maybe 4-year duration, and the value is 100 million, which doesn't seem a lot compared to the others, but this is targeting high-end public sector supply, so executives, chief executives, and senior staffing. So core modular services, they reckon, will identify and attracting potential applicants to apply for positions, their assessment and evaluation, and the offer of employment. And then there's some non-core services, and again, these may include strategy and planning, talent development, talent mapping, reserve lists and talent pools, executive development and coaching, technology services such as applicant tracking and video interviews, and some international recruitment. The pre-market engagement is due to start in the next month or so for this. So again, we'll get this information out to people that have signed up when we have it.
So we do actually have some other routes to market as well, which are maybe not spoken about as much as what a traditional framework is. So we've got vendor frameworks. So you've got a neutral vendor framework, which is run through organisations like Matrix. They operate a neutral vendor framework, which you can join and supply your services through. Opportunities are released to all suppliers under a neutral vendor for supply opportunity at the same time. So some of the main neutral vendor frameworks are Public Sector Resource and Framework, which is operated by AMS on behalf of Crown Commercial Services. And then, like I've just said as well, Matrix Workforce. We have a different type of vendor framework, and this is a master vendor framework. So these operate slightly different, where there's one named supplier on the framework and opportunities are given to them to fulfill first. And then before they are released to suppliers, they can say if they want to. If they don't want to, they can then pass them on to suppliers they onboard as a second tier. So some of the ones that we've got for that are supply teachers and temporary staffing, which is a lot 2. Then we've got something called a dynamic purchasing system, which Graham touched on when he did the introduction. These are a procurement tool that allow public sector to buy your services through a very simple process. There's quite a lot of different dynamic purchasing systems out there, but just a few are supply of temporary workers, recruitment, DPS, and corporate services, temporary and permanent recruitment. A DPS is slightly different to a framework, in which it is usually open for applications throughout the lifetime of the contract. So if we've got a DPS that's in place from 2020 until 2030, it will be open for suppliers as a rule of thumb to join throughout the lifetime of the contract, whereas within the frameworks, they do tend to have specific time slots that you can apply to become a supplier through that framework.
Super. Cheers, Stacey. So with regards to all frameworks and DPSs, there's some compliance elements and things we need to think of. So the first one is insurances. They definitely will include public and professional liability, employer's liability, and sometimes, depending on what you're supplying, it could be part of a tech solution or product liability insurance. The minimum value for some of these is 5 million, but you don't have to have it in place immediately. It would be on framework award, and that's part of the framework agreement that you would confirm. There is generally a number of standards and accreditations that you need. ISOs, things like 9001, 27001, 14001 could be relevant. A lot of the time they ask for equivalent. Now, the equivalent doesn't mean potentially a formal certificate. It means that your processes and systems operate to that standard. Another type of standard that will be needed. So if you're doing the NHS Workforce Alliance Healthcare Solutions Framework, you would need your recruitment processes to match the NHS standards of recruitment and the 6 core steps in that. And that's the type of thing that we would ultimately support you with on that to make sure everything matches. In terms of recruitment frameworks, they like you to be registered with all the national recruitment bodies as a member. All frameworks now, they're looking for the Cyber Essentials Basic Certificate. It's a self-assessment certificate that you fill in yourself and submit and send off, and then you get it back. Or if you get feedback, you can change your systems and then reapply. You get one reapplication, I think it is free of charge. But that ultimately means that you're verified and you're cyber secure. Everybody will need a carbon reduction plan in line with the procurement policy note 0621. So what that means is that your carbon footprint in essence is measured and benchmarked, and then you show your carbon reduction plan over a period of time. Certain or different public sector bodies require different standards on when you ultimately are aiming to be carbon neutral or your reduction takes place. NHS was 2030, but it changed to 2040. The rest of central government, I think, is 2050, and some others are 2045. But again, carbon reduction plan, we'll take you through the process and we'll produce that for you. We'll need copies of your past 3 years of accounts. The reason for that is that they're looking at financial viability and financial standing. Now, depending on the framework, depending on the awarding body, there are different versions of financial viability risk assessments. Again, we'll provide that template and send it through, but people are generally asking for the past 3 years of accounts plus that kind of risk assessment filling in. There's always some type of technical ability or contract examples, so you'll need to think about the work you're doing. Now, that doesn't have to be public sector work, it can be private sector work as well. So people that want to enter the public sector and, you know, they go, oh, I don't have the public sector experience, you don't need it. We just need contract examples from the private sector that fit that criteria for the framework. And again, it's the type of thing we can guide you through. Social value, ultimately plays generally about 10% of the overall scoring. Now, people think, oh, social value, I don't plant a tree for every ream of paper I use. You don't need to. Social value ultimately comes in lots of different forms, and there's generally 3, 4, or 5 different themes that account to that. So one is employability, something like well-being. Some is supporting your local community, underserved groups. There's a whole range of different social value initiatives, but ultimately that's up to us to bring that out from your business to kind of promote and put into that. On top of the compliancy type elements, there will be technical or quality questions that come into the framework. Now, they're generally around how you do something, how you look after your customers, what your processes are, and so on. The way that scoring works on frameworks, it's generally 30% price, 70% quality, or 60% quality, 40% price. So people that think it's a race to the bottom, it's not. It's about having a sensible pricing where you can make money, you can transact in the public sector and deliver a quality service. That's what it's all about. So Thornton Lowe, myself and Stacey and the team have been working to look at how we can support people getting onto a framework or a DPS. And we've broken it down ultimately into 3 main stages to manage the process. So the first stage, if you on board with us, is we look at your gap analysis and compliance. We look through your policies, procedures, certifications, accreditations, which may be required for the framework. We look at providing you guys templated documents and tailoring guidance and other bits to fill those gaps in that compliance. And we advise on how to meet the framework specific requirements, ensuring your submission is not disqualified for that non-compliance element. As I say, if it says ISO or equivalent, that's up to us to work out what that equivalent is and present it to the awarding body and get through. The second stage when we're live is that our expert bid team handle the element of the submission. So myself or Stacey would kind of project manage it, do the submission, and we bring on board our writers to do the writing. We produce those compliant responses with our writers to demonstrate the value, experience and capability that you have and what you do. We coordinate all the documents. So in that compliance element, we'll have asked you for a lot of information, but there might be something that the framework says we need and we've not asked for. So we'll get it and we'll make sure we've got everything together. And ultimately, we'll manage the deadline for the submission around the logistics, making sure everything is uploaded, complied and submitted on time. You've then got a period of time after the submission deadline where it will be evaluated. We'll continue to monitor the portals in that time, answer any questions with you that are needed for the awarding body if they're asking for clarification on anything. But ultimately on that framework award, you know, you've gone through this process to get on there, you're on there. The last stage is about maximizing that opportunity. So ultimately it's doing some sessions with you around marketing your award, how you do the sales outreach, how you monitor and engage with the procuring body. Lots of people think that once you run a framework, the phone instantly rings and, you know, it's going to do it. It doesn't work like that. They transact through portals and messages and other areas. So it's about just educating and supporting through that. So Chris, I'm going to hand over to you to see if there's any questions from any of that.
No, everyone seems to be very well informed from that. But just as a reminder, I know there were a few people that joined a little bit later. If you do have any questions or that have been raised through the slides that we've gone through, just drop them into the chat session at the side. So if you're not that familiar with it, if you go down to the chat button on the bottom panel, it's the second from the left. We've got just a comment from Shane saying that he's found the session really informative. So no questions on that side there in terms of that. So we're looking all good. We'll give it a couple of minutes just to people to feedback at all, but use that time to sort of sum up what we're going to be doing next. We've got another webinar coming up. I think is it the 10th of April? Yeah, 10th of April. Like Graham said, on the next steps once you actually get onto that framework. So if you're keen to join that, it will be on our Eventbrite page. I'll also put a link to that into the follow-up email that you'll get after the session. So that'll probably be coming out to you all tomorrow. There'll also be a recording of the session that we've had here as well. So if you've got anything you'd like to revisit or refer back to, that recording will be sent out as well. So it looks like we've not got any additional questions, Graham and Stacey. So with that, just
before we do, Chris, if anybody's got any questions or, you know, some people might be tech shy. If you want to know anything or you want to chat with me and Stacey, the email frameworks@thorntonlowe.com. That's the best way to get us. It comes to both of us. If you're unsure what's right for you, wrong for you, if you want to know anything, just chat to us. What you'll find is we'll be honest and open with you around where you're at, where you need to go. And if you're entering public sector and not sure where to start, you know, don't be put off by it. It is a beast of a market. and it's a stable market generally. So, you know, it's good. I've supplied public sector for over 10 years through a third sector organisation, and, you know, we did fantastic work and supported the NHS. And ultimately, what we're after is quality suppliers to support the public sector, mainly because we get better value for money at that point. So, you know, that's why we're engaging with you guys. So thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Well, right. Thanks, everyone. I'll follow that up with you all tomorrow. It's like Graham said, if you've got any additional questions or anything, we'll get back to you. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you. Bye.